They told you alcohol is just a drink, a ritual, a release. But what if every sip disconnects you, not only from the world, but from yourself? What if the real cost of drinking isn't in your liver or your thoughts, but in your soul? This isn't about addiction. It's about energy, what flows in and what escapes without you noticing. Across centuries, mystics, sages, and alchemists whispered of a force hidden in this substance. They called it Al-Kuhul. Not just a word, an ancient warning, a spirit, extracted through fire that was never meant to enter the human body. And yet, today, we drink it for comfort, for confidence, for escape. But escape from what? What if the urge to numb is actually a sacred invitation to awaken? Since ancient times, human beings have longed to touch something beyond the visible, to escape the heaviness of the world, if only for a moment. And in this search, across empires and centuries, we have repeatedly turned to one substance: alcohol. Celebrated in rituals, honored in myths, and passed from generation to generation like a sacred fire or a forbidden fruit. But hidden behind the laughter, the toasts, the numbness, there lies something else, something few ever dare to question. What if alcohol is not just a drink, but a symbol? What if it carries a spiritual weight no one ever told you about? The word we now call alcohol finds its root in the Arabic al-Kuhul, originally describing a black coal powder used around the eyes. But to ancient alchemists, this word held far deeper meaning. Al-Kuhul was the body-eating spirit, the invisible essence extracted from matter, the volatile force that left the body behind. It was not a cosmetic, it was a warning, a metaphor for something that could remove the soul from its grounding, like smoke escaping the crucible. Today, we drink it in celebration, in sorrow, in longing, in boredom. And most of us never consider what it does beyond the body, but across spiritual traditions, ancient philosophies and mystical teachings, from the Sufi poets to the Indian sages, from the Hermetic scrolls to the writings of Steiner, there is a consistent message. Alcohol doesn't just alter your mind, it opens your field, and not in the way you think. What if every sip unseals a doorway, not only to a state of euphoria or release, but to something that siphons your light, something that clouds your clarity, not just chemically, but spiritually? In this video, we'll go beyond the surface and dive into the forgotten origin of alcohol. We'll explore the esoteric symbolism hidden in its name, its place in ancient initiations, and the metaphysical consequences that unfold when it enters the energy body. We'll look at why so many spiritual teachers warned against it, not as a rule of morality, but as a call to energetic preservation. And most importantly, we'll uncover the deeper truth that the desire to escape, to dissolve into something else, often masks a sacred calling, one not to be numbed but to be answered. Let us begin the descent through the illusion, and remember what the soul has always known. To understand what alcohol truly represents on a spiritual level, we must look beyond the glass, beyond the liquid, and into the origins of the word itself. Al-Kuhul, in its earliest form, referred to a fine black powder, coal, used to darken the eyes in ancient Arabic traditions. But to the alchemists, this term was never merely cosmetic, it was symbolic. It represented the essence that could be separated from matter through fire, a volatile spirit extracted from the body of a substance, the spirit of a thing, distilled and freed. This symbolic association is not coincidental. In alchemical philosophy, alcohol is seen as a separating agent, something that lifts the spirit out of the physical, detaching it from the grounding of form. It was viewed with awe, but also with caution, for just as fire can transform, it can also consume. And the Al-Kuhul was believed to consume not only matter, but the vitality tethering the soul to the body. That's why even today we call alcoholic beverages spirits. It's a linguistic remnant of a mystical truth. Alcohol is not neutral. It's a force. And forces, especially those with the power to loosen the bonds between body, mind, and spirit, must be handled with understanding. Across the ancient world, alcohol played a dual role. In Mesopotamia, wine was poured as an offering to the gods. In Egypt, it was linked to Osiris, the god of death and rebirth. To the Greeks, wine belonged to Dionysus, divine madness, ecstasy, and revelation. In these early societies, alcohol was both honored and feared. It was used in rites of passage, sacred rituals, and divine communion. But it was never casual. It was never for escape. It was a threshold between the seen and the unseen. Yet with time, this reverence faded. What was once symbolic became recreational. What was once ritual became routine. And something shifted. Alcohol no longer opened doors to the divine. It began opening doors to disconnection. Esoteric traditions have long taught that humans are not merely flesh and thought, but fields of energy in motion. We are surrounded by vibrational structures, what some call the aura, through which life force flows. Every choice we make, every substance we ingest, interacts with this field. And alcohol is a disruptor. When consumed, it doesn't just dull the senses, it tears the veil that protects the energy body. It thins the boundaries between self and other, between thought and influence. And while this can lead to temporary states of openness or boldness, it also creates vulnerability, space for uninvited forces to slip in. The spiritual consequence is subtle but profound. A weakening of clarity, an erosion of discernment, and a disconnection from the higher self. This is why so many ancient teachings, from the Vedas to the Sutras, include warnings, not because alcohol is bad, but because it is powerful. The root chakra may awaken with fiery urgency after drinking, but the crown closes, and with it, our connection to the divine dims. We descend into the material and forget the source. This too is a kind of intoxication, a sleep disguised as awakening, a thrill that leads not upward but inward into illusion. And so the teachings remind us, not all openings are liberating. Some are invitations for the spirit to leak out while other energies pour in. Alcohol is one of those gateways, and unless entered with reverence and deep awareness, it becomes not a bridge to the divine, but a slide into fragmentation. In the realm of symbols, alcohol is more than liquid. It is metaphor made material. Its effects are not limited to the bloodstream or the brain, but ripple across dimensions of perception, will, and soul. It is no coincidence that in ancient initiations, the act of drinking was often ritualistic, symbolic of death and rebirth. But when that ritual is stripped of meaning, the transformation becomes distortion. Imagine a temple once sacred, now abandoned. The walls still echo the chants of the past, but the light that once filled it has long since faded. This is what alcohol becomes in the modern world, a sacred fire left untended, now burning wild in forgotten hands. The Sufis spoke of wine, not to celebrate intoxication, but to describe divine longing. Rumi's verses are filled with metaphors of drunkenness, not of the flesh, but of the spirit, the soul overcome by the nearness of the beloved. But even he warned, literal wine was a detour, not a destination. The real ecstasy was in union, not in escape. In Hermetic and alchemical traditions, alcohol was seen as a solvent, a substance capable of dissolving boundaries. Used with discipline, it could separate the pure from the impure. But without that discipline, it dissolved the very structures meant to protect us. It opened the gates not to light, but to confusion. And so, symbolism began to shift. The cup, once sacred, became a symbol of illusion. The drink, once divine, became a mask. In dreams and visions across cultures, the act of drinking often appears as a warning. The liquid is sweet, but laced with forgetting. The moment of pleasure conceals a deeper loss of memory, of clarity, of sovereignty. There is a reason so many spiritual traditions speak of sobriety not only as abstinence but as presence. To be sober in its truest sense is to be whole, to be awake, to remember. Alcohol offers the opposite path, the way of forgetting. Not all at once, but slowly. The edges blur, the inner voice grows quiet, and soon we no longer hear the whisper of our essence. In its place, echoes. Voices, not our own. Emotions that enter from elsewhere. Decisions made in fog. Mystics speak of the axis mundi, the spiritual axis that links the earthly realm to the divine. When that axis is stable, energy flows freely between the soul and the cosmos. But when we consume alcohol excessively or unconsciously, that axis bends, it tilts. The line between what is ours and what is not becomes harder to trace. We lose the vertical and fall into the horizontal. The plane of distraction, of noise, of disconnection. Even shamans who sometimes use altered states for sacred purpose do so with ritual, with guidance, with intent. And they are clear. Alcohol is not a medicine. It is not a teacher. It is a door that once opened carelessly does not always close easily. To walk the spiritual path is not to fear the drink, but to understand its nature. To see through the glamour, the seduction, the veil. To recognize that what we often seek in the drink is not the drink itself, but the feeling of being free, open, connected. And that feeling, contrary to what we've been told, does not live in the bottle. It lives in the soul. Once the veil is lifted, the question emerges. What now? How does one live with this awareness in a world where alcohol is everywhere, woven into celebration, comfort, even loneliness? The answer is not in fear, nor in rejection, but in remembrance. The first step is not to stop drinking, it is to observe, to notice the moment when the desire arises, to become aware of the emotion underneath. Is it stress, sadness, social pressure? Is it boredom masked as ritual? In that observation, the seed of transformation is planted, because what we observe, we begin to reclaim. When we consume alcohol unconsciously, we do not just escape pain, we postpone presence. But when we bring the light of attention to the urge itself, something shifts. The act of drinking becomes less automatic. The grip of compulsion loosens. And in that space, we begin to hear a subtler voice, one that does not shout but whispers. You do not need this to be yourself. Energetically, alcohol leaves traces. Just as it lingers in the bloodstream, it lingers in the aura. The energy field becomes porous, the chakras disoriented. But the human system is not fragile. It is made to realign. Through spiritual practice, the field remembers its symmetry. Meditation, when practiced regularly, repairs what was scattered. It re-centers the mind and clears the residual fog left behind by chemical influences. Breathwork awakens the flow of life force, prana, chi, ruach, and begins the work of purification from within. Reiki and energy healing techniques seal energetic leaks and invite wholeness. Even simple rituals of grounding, walking barefoot on the earth, immersing the body in water, observing silence, can restore balance to a field disrupted by artificial stimulation. Beyond the personal field, awareness must also extend to the spaces we enter. Collective environments saturated with alcohol, bars, parties, crowded celebrations often carry an energetic residue. The aura of a space is shaped by the consciousness of those within it. And when intention is lost, chaos fills the vacuum. This is why so many spiritual lineages advise not only moderation, but discernment about where and with whom we drink. It is not about shame. It is about sovereignty. Gratitude is also a form of medicine. When we shift from wanting what numbs to appreciating what is, the frequency of our field changes. Gratitude for breath, for clarity, for a sober sunrise, becomes a quiet act of rebellion against the spell of escape. It is not about denying pleasure. It is about rediscovering it in its purest form. Conscious presence. There is power in choice. Not the forced discipline of resistance, but the sacred remembering of what you are. You are not broken. You are not in need of anesthesia. You are alive, consciousness in motion. And every time you say no to what dulls that motion, you are saying yes to who you truly are. The world may continue to celebrate what sedates, but those who walk the path of awakening learn to celebrate what ignites. So ask yourself, not with judgment, but with honesty, what is it that I'm truly seeking when I reach for a drink? Perhaps it's peace, perhaps it's courage, silence, or the feeling of being enough just for a moment. But if these are the things we seek, then maybe alcohol was never the source, only a mirror, a shadow, a signal of what's missing and what's possible. Because the truth is, alcohol does not create these states. It simulates them briefly, then buries them under fog. And we begin again, chasing what was never really there. But when you pause, when you choose to stay present even in discomfort, you begin to remember. You remember that clarity is natural, that joy doesn't need permission, that stillness isn't silence, it's presence. And in that presence, the illusion dissolves. And perhaps now, more than ever, the question is not, why should I stop drinking? But rather, what becomes possible when I choose to remain awake? Because to remain awake is to remain whole, to remember the self that existed before the noise, to call your energy back, and to realize that the light you tried to borrow was always your own. This is not a call for purity. It is a return to power, to sovereignty over your field, to the wisdom that your energy is sacred, and what enters your body shapes the clarity of your soul. If this reflection stirred something in you, don't silence it. Let it echo. Let it grow. Not with urgency, but with reverence. And when the noise of the world returns, when escape tempts you with its soft illusions, remember, the real sanctuary isn't out there. It's within, waiting, quiet, alive. Because what you seek has always lived inside you. And now, it's simply calling you to listen.